Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, just about everywhere else at Hawk Blogger. I'm even thinking about opening a TikTok account for this show. I think it's probably about time. So keep an eye out for that as well. And we got a special Seahawks Saturday. Jeff Simmons is busy being a soon-to-be baby daddy. He's not getting, sorry, that sounded that like he was about to have a baby. He is doing going to a 1-year-old's birthday party. So he's in that phase of life where he's getting to spend time with other new parents or soon to be new parents. So we get a special treat. We get Griff Sturgeon from Seattle Overload here to talk with us about all things Seahawks. How are you doing today, Griff?
Doing quite all right. It's a dreary Saturday Washington morning, but we were escaping this for too long, so it's only right that we get dumped on a Saturday morning. So,
do you want to hop on this flight with me in a few hours down to Phoenix? It's supposed to be like 75.
I wouldn't mind it. I'll even, you can put me in the storage section even. I don't
Okay.
mind.
Well, you've got like the full Northwest beard going for the winter. So like, I don't know, you'd have to shave probably to really get the full Phoenix experience. I like the beard. I was going to put one of my old pictures of you on the thumbnail, and I was like, wait, I saw a recent episode of Overload, and I'm like, no, he's rocking the beard now. We got to get that on there. How are you feeling right now about your Seattle Seahawks?
They're 7-5, and 2 weeks ago, I thought 8 wins, maybe 9, coming off the Rams game. Even though I liked that game, how the defense went, right? And like the offense moved the ball, but had some disaster moments, right? But in this moment, like looking at the schedule, like it's a tough final home stretch. But I feel like they have a real shot at winning 3 more and being a 10-win team. And I think 10 wins the division right now in this moment. So all things considered, like I feel pretty good about especially where I felt like about a month ago.
What's changed?
Well, I mean, the defense just keeps trending. The offense is frustrating, but like if the defense keeps, I feel like they have a drive or two in them in a game that the defense can make a 1-score game. And like that combination you probably burn out in the playoffs pretty quick, but like still getting there is quite the rush. So, I mean, I think it's just like, I still trust the offense when it's like a do or die moment, but like outside of that, but the defense will give them do or die moments. So it's really that combination. Plus there's kind of like that, even though the special teams kind of combusted, I just feel like there's that collective mindset, that, subjective and tangible quality that Mike kind of has them all geared up on. Like, I think they're built for any moment. They kind of have a short memory as a team, which is good, in spite of all their flaws. So it's like, I don't think there's any more playing down to an opponent or, et cetera. It's just whatever happens is just a reflection of the strength of the two teams that are involved in any given game. So.
Yeah, it's I don't know about you, but it does remind me of the kind of Pete Carroll formula, right? Like good defense. The one thing they don't have, we'll talk about this, is a run game, but like good defense, low score, keep it to where you can win the game in the fourth quarter and trust that you've got a quarterback that can rise up in that occasion to save the day. And it was a formula that won a lot of games, but also a formula that freaked out fans every single week. And I think this year's Seahawks have certainly had their fair share of freak out worthy moments. That Jets game certainly qualifies for a number of those. It's interesting. You talk about the defense and the transformation there. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the offense, which has not yet gone through the, evolution that I think we all want to see. But what have you learned about your head coach and your defensive, play caller over the course of this season that maybe you didn't know when the season started?
Really the word that comes to mind is adaptable. And I don't mean like I think in-game adaptations is a little overrated, but I think week-to-week adaptations can be undersold. How he's tweaked his scheme around, he's doing stuff he did not do in Baltimore. And I mean, that's a little overemphasized, a little oversimplified by me. But I mean, to make a pivot like that mid-season, and like not even like being the head coach too, like not just the DC where he only has to worry about his defense. I think that's really cool. Like one of my favorite things as a football fan is watching a unit have a problem and then there be like tangible things you can point to on the screen, like, oh, this is them trying to fix that problem. One, it signals they know it's a problem, and then two, like, hey, this is what they think about football, because you tip a lot of what you think about football with how you go about trying to fix it. So that part has been really fascinating to watch unfold. I mean, from like different play calls that he's living in, and then and then the techniques they're in, like I find that really just interesting. So for me, the word for McDonald is adaptability, and then that mentality of kind of like staying the course with, like, not, don't get too high, don't get too low. Like that's something that really tends to, well, I mean, I think that's allowed them to see it through to the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they didn't make big decisions. They've cut a bunch of guys, right? They've made trades, but the mentality, I think, still allowed for all of this to kind of come to fruition like it has.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you and Maddie had talked about some concerns like with McDonald's run defense over the second half of last year. It started to kind of erode. Then, sure enough, the beginning of this season, or at least the middle of this season, the run defense was the worst in the NFL by pretty much any way you'd measure it. And now it's found its footing, and it's one of the top 5 run defenses in football since they've kind of made some of these adjustments. And interestingly, it seems like a lot of the Mike McDonald coaching tree kind of defenses are among the top 5 in run defense. Anything that you've picked up there that's like enhanced your perspective on how he approaches run defense?
Well, and that's really fascinating, right? Because I expected like the spectrum of good and bad things to follow all those DCs wherever they went from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened in Baltimore would apply. And it is really interesting that, given Baltimore's consistency in pass defense last year, and then the up and down stuff with the run defense really the last 2 years, the common characteristic of all the Denner Wilson and Weaver and everybody, and then also McDonald's replacement in Baltimore, Zach Orr, like their run defense has been the most consistent part, and their pass defense has been a little bit up and down. Like, that's really curious. Like, well, why is that? Like, and then their successful run defense is for different reasons too, like on each team. Like Weaver doesn't have good run defense right now for the same reasons McDonald does. It's for slightly different reasons. Like Weaver's actually coaching it the way they coached it in Baltimore, with a weird exception. He just lets his linebackers go at the expense of, like, if you're wrong, the whole scheme's broken. Like, you're talking even worse than what Seattle had. But so there's something in the way Weaver's coaching the backers to let them key aggressively and take their shots. McDonald wasn't doing that the first half of the season. His solution was, well, I'm just going to change the structure. Like, I'm not going to have an individual player, hey, if you see an opening, go for it. It's more like, I'm going to allow you to keep playing kind of quasi-conservatively, but I'm going to add more numbers to the run game, even from too high, that allows you to, it leaves a larger margin for error. So if you're misaligned a little bit post snap, you can more easily correct yourself. So yeah, that's been fascinating. It is really weird why the Baltimore's pass defense has fallen off, and I think some of that is like catch point variance, and that defense invited a lot of passes over the middle last year, but they defended it super well. And this year, like, it's really the same target frequency over the middle, but they're giving up more completions. So, without really watching them, I don't really know why, but it has been interesting to see this tree grow. But like, even though they're getting there in different ways, they're all finding success. And I think that speaks to how they apply that Wink Martindale playbook. McDonald's take on it is really fascinating. Not wanting to live in the rush 5, rush 6 world, but the rush 4 world of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this was a team that when they were trying to defend the run and light box earlier in the year, it was atrocious. I mean, like
So bad.
unwatchable. And now it's pretty solid.
Mhm.
So it's been really fascinating. Some of it clearly is personnel, some of it's coaching, and I would bring this up in part because I was curious your thoughts. Lots changed over the course of this season, which is cool. Like it's nice that there's things changing, and in
Yeah.
some ways, again, to kind of harken back to Pete Carroll, in the early Pete Carroll years, it was always very common for the team to peak at the end of the season to play their
Mhm.
best ball, and it felt like the coaching had kind of fit in, and they'd kind of found what they were good at. And it feels like it'd been a while since that was the case, and
Mhm.
it feels like the defense, at least, that's been the case here, but the other reason I wanted to bring this up is I don't know if you guys were getting this on your show, or maybe you guys were part of it. I honestly don't know.
Mhm.
But like week by week 5, people were calling for Mike McDonald's job. Like they were wanting him
Yeah.
out of Seattle. They were calling him Brandon Staley. They were calling him Jim Mora Jr. It was like, this guy's trash. He's supposed to be a defensive coach. The defense is terrible.
Mhm.
And those people are pretty quiet now, or at least
Mhm.
they've been placated, or maybe they're waiting in in the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I bring that up because I wouldn't say the pitchforks are out quite to the same level I was hearing them for McDonald, but for Ryan Grubb right now, there's a growing
Mhm.
din around what's going on with the offense and frustration with what's been a number of weeks of just inefficient, not explosive, just struggling offense. And so I want you and I to talk about that, and also keep in mind how quickly or how things change over time,
Mhm.
and that sometimes you need a little time for that to happen. So I want to play for you, Griff. So there was some really interesting sound from Ryan Grubb
Okay.
this Thursday. And I want to play this for you and for other people. The first thing I want to play for you, there's 3 different clips we're going to listen to and get reactions from you on each. And then we'll talk about our perspectives on this stuff. But
Sure.
first one was a question about, what have you learned so far this year,
Mhm.
12, 13 weeks in?
Oh wow, there's tons of things. I think finding ways to build your team around the guys you got are things that we've always been pretty good at, and I think that we've tried to highlight those things and keep building around the guys that we have and the players we have. But as far as like learning processes, I think that the coordinator families in the NFL and where guys come from and the different type of processes those defensive families, so to speak, have. I think that's probably one of the biggest things because everybody kind of comes from certain trees, and so certainly evaluating some of those things and seeing what type of things people draw back to is unique to the NFL.
Curious if anything stood out to you on that one, Griff. There was one statement that jumped out to me, and it could be
Mhm.
interpreted a bunch of different ways.
Well, I kind of extracted 2 main things from there. One was him talking about wanting to rally around what you're good at and build out of that, and like that certainly makes sense. And I think they have done a good job of that in certain areas, and then in other areas not as much. Just in my opinion. But then the other side of it was really interesting is how we talked about the defensive families around the league and adapting to that. The college game, like he knows what college defenses are doing. He doesn't necessarily have as intimate knowledge, not knowledge per se, but intimate experience interacting with and coaching against all the different trees around the league and the very, specific minutia that kind of delineates the differences between all of them. And that's something that, you know, you talk about like, well, the transition for the college game to the NFL game, like that's a loaded phrase. That can mean so many things. That was an aspect that I didn't necessarily think about as much. I didn't think about attacking NFL scheme in that specific way that he meant. And that's something that like, yeah, he was always going to need some time to like tinker with because he himself is a very much like he's a matchup hunter above all.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to know how to manipulate defenses to get the matchups you want, and especially downfield. And so like you have to learn how defenses how they check and adjust to different formations that you throw out there so that you can manipulate them and break their rules and get a guy one-on-one that the defensive coordinator does not want in a one-on-one situation. So that was definitely something interesting, and that definitely is something that shows up against the 49ers defense and the Jets defense, because they run it similarly. And I think some of the other like Carroll solid teams that they've faced, that's definitely a common theme. And then it's not really a surprise to me that he kind of does a little bit better in terms of like yards per attempt anyway, against the kind of like the Fangio and like Phillips, like Wade Phillips kind of tree, which are like Vance Joseph and stuff, at least as being able to push the ball. So he did push the ball against the Rams. Yeah. So there's some interesting things there. But what did you draw from that though?
Those are all great. And for me, when I was there hearing it the first time, when he said, the first thing he said was building around who you've got, the personnel you've got. My first impression was you can't do things that you want to do. Like there's things that you want to be able to do and you don't have the horses to do it. And he then kind of came back to it in a different sort of way, which is accentuate the strengths that you've got and like get the ball to your best players. I think that's part of it. But my interpretation of his first reaction was you can't do what you want to do. And you got to figure out, okay, with what you have, what can you do? What's on the menu that will work? That felt to me like this has been a little frustrating. Like there's things he wants to do that he can't do.
The O-line, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. I wouldn't be surprised if, there are certain things that the receivers or the backs or whatever are better at or not as good at that he's not able to take advantage of or is.
Yeah.
So that stood out to me a little bit.
For sure.
The next clip I want to play for you is him talking about working for the first time, a defensive-minded head coach and what his thoughts were there.
It is definitely a first for me there, and Coach Frazier and Mike are definitely defensive guys. So I think that it's just perspective, honestly. You have to, at first you can, even way back to OTAs, I'd be like, wow, I would have liked to, run 20, 30 more plays in this situation and not been with the defense and things like that. So there's things that I think how they look at things. Sometimes I think defensively there's more of a holistic approach to it versus, sometimes offensive guys are just like run as many plays as you want or whatever you need to do, and you can focus more on that way. And I think there's give and take in both those situations, but certainly what I've appreciated about Mike is, his understanding of, how to win games, and that's what I think in the last few weeks we've really come together on that, if we need to hang on to the ball and take care of it and they're playing lights out, then we can do that. If we have to be explosive and try to go after people and play catch up, we can do that too. So I think marrying those things together and continue to learn that process has been valuable.
So Griff, one just meta note there. What I've noticed the last month when I've talked to Ryan Grubb, I don't sense a lot of joy, man. Like it feels like he is going through it. And when you hear him talking about working for a defensive head coach for the first time, I didn't get the impression it's been exactly what he hoped for.
Right. Well, so the thing that like jumps out at me from that is when he talked about how much time you get to run certain plays and stuff. And he was being really diplomatic to Mike, right? But that to me, I think has been the source of all their issues this year on both sides of the ball when they've had problems. It's the operational stuff, like the time on task behind the scenes that we can't see. But like when the defense is playing bad, and yet I hold the opinion that Mike McDonald's a good coach, and I hold the opinion that the players are really good, at least in the aggregate, and yet the results are bad. Like, how do I reconcile that? The only way I can think is a head coach who is, going from being a DC to a head coach, there's different demands of the job that you've never done before. And you have very little context that you're bringing with you, new staff. There's so much just running a building, and there can be so many inefficiencies in that when you're starting. It's like you're creating a startup, you got to figure things. You can only work those things out through trial and error. And staff chemistry, I don't mean like how do they get on interpersonally, but like literally how do they work together? Like you can only figure these things out over time. I have a lot of criticisms of Grubb this year, but in fairness to him, and if he was hired to a team where there was a pre-existing head coach, where that coach had context and he could kind of get the new OC, in this case Grubb, like situated, like, hey, here's all our guys, this is what we've done in the past and stuff. I suspect that Grubb's first year in the NFL would have been better than it would be in a context where he's hiring on to a new team where the head coach is also new. That was always going to be like ankle weights for the whole team. Mm-hmm. And like we saw that with the defense, and the defense, was able to, shed those ankle weights. And I think the offense is still getting there. I think though the way the offense is failing, it's in a way that it's like you almost need to start over. Like it's quit trying to remodel the house, just tear it down and start over again. And it will be really interesting to see what happens in the offseason. I'm not in favor of like firing him. Like I don't like firing a coordinator after 1 year on principle, even if I'm like really disenchanted with how the year has gone. I do think there needs to be either staff tweaks or additions. I mean, if they just keep nosediving offensively, then maybe you got to take a look. I don't know, but I don't think that has to be the answer. Like Grubb year 2 could be fireworks, like I'm not against that, that possibility being realistic, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting comment, because my hunch has always been that it's been something like behind the scenes that we can't see with practice time and just the way things are structured. Because I'm sure it's very different than it was in college.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of the notes there, and some of it for me is just you're adjusting to a coach you haven't worked with, you're adjusting to a league you haven't worked in, you're adjusting to assistant coach other than Huff that you haven't worked with, players you haven't worked with, and to your point, on top of all of it, it's a first-time head coach that doesn't have all his processes down, doesn't have his operational stuff down. That's clearly been changing, and they've iterated on it over the course of the year. And on top of all that, your coach is defensive-minded, so you don't have that shared kind of like. People probably forget, but Mike Macdonald in training camp, he talked about offense like it was a foreign language. Like he talked about, like, I don't know what those guys do. I mean, they do whatever they could do. I'm doing those stuff. Like he really firewalled it. He now talks about it over the course of the season much differently and how much he's involved. His language has changed there drastically.
Yeah.
But like it was kind of up to the offensive side to figure things out, and now they're kind of adjusting to each other, and that's got to be its own unique challenge.
For sure. And, McDonald hasn't had time in his football life to really sit down and think about what he believes about offensive football. It's outside of like broad abstractions. Pete Carroll, I mean, he's 70, so he's had so many decades to think about that. If you go back to after he gets fired from
which time?
Right,
he got fired multiple times to come up with those philosophies.
Totally. So everything he talks about Bill Walsh a lot and the West Coast offense a lot. The USC offense was extremely good, and Pete had a lot of care and concern over how it was like constructed in the macro. And he kept hiring guys. And I was talking to Bobby Peters, who puts together those like really cool playbook manuals, like reverse engineering teams playbooks. And I was talking about like Pete's USC offenses and stuff. And he was like, yeah, I watched that offense at the time and in hindsight. And he said that for the time, it was the cutting edge version of like what Harbaugh and Gruden were doing. And so Pete, like, and who he's hired since, has been everyone from the West Coast offense with the exception of Shoddy. But then he had Shoddy kind of run the West Coast version to match with Russ anyway. So like Pete clearly has, and it's not just related to how much you're running, how much you're passing. His notion of what the offense is and how to institute things for the quarterback, like he has opinions on it, but it took him, 10 years of going back and forth between being a head coach and a DC to get there. Mike is still in his infancy there with, hey, what do I actually believe about offensive football? Like, what do I like? Doesn't that mean he's calling the plays? He's not micromanaging the details, but like, what world do I want my OC to live in? So we're going to see like that, that unfold over time. Right. And I am curious for that process.
Yeah, last clip I want to play, and then we'll freestyle a bit on a couple other things. So I asked him here, first time he's worked for a different head coach, period, for a little while, and sometimes like when things, especially when things don't go well for a period of time, you don't have that shared history to kind of fall back on and shared language to kind of refer to. And how has that been for Ryan Grubb? Here's what he said. To lean back on.
Yeah, that's good. I think that you have to trust your decision making early on, and there's a reason I took this job and the trust that I have in Mike, and I think that's a huge part of any relationship, right? Whether it's a working relationship or whatever, and certainly there's built up reps, so to speak, with a guy like Kalen when I was with him for a long time, and so when you hit those bumps in the road, they're easier to manage and get through. So certainly this season has provided a lot of growth opportunities for Mike and I, and I'm thankful for that. And I think the relationship has gotten stronger, and the understanding of what we're trying to get done as a team just continues to build. So it's been fun, honestly.
Ryan Grubb's been very honest and very forthright all year. I don't think it's been fun. I don't buy that answer one bit.
Yeah.
And the implication, Griff, is that that if the relationship's gone stronger, it wasn't as strong to begin with. And I don't think that's just about, hey, we didn't know each other. I think it was rocky. That's my assessment. That's my guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, who knows, right? I mean, when you go on a losing streak, things aren't going to be great. But there's there's healthy conflict management, and I don't know what that was like, right? But I hope winning the last 3 weeks, even if the offense isn't the main reason why, it's probably helped, smooth things out if they needed smoothed out. But that was a diplomatic answer. I agree. I think Grubb just really needs like another Detroit game offensively, or another Patriots game, just to get the monkey off his back a little bit. Yeah, I agree. I don't think he's having a lot of fun. I think it's a lot more problem solving than scheming from a point of strength right now, and that's got to be wearing on him.
Well, have you ever had a boss that doesn't really get what you do? Like, have you ever had a boss where you've just like they're like, well, why are you doing that? Or they're criticizing. You're having to go over it with them, and you just know, like, I know what I'm doing here, and I have to figure out how to explain a decade's worth of my experience to you, versus someone you've got background with, or someone that's got similar experience, and you have a lingua franca you can kind of touch on, right? Like, it's tough. It's tough, especially in a highly visible, high pressure job. So I think those things are all very predictable that's going on. And as we kind of turn into this, I want to get your, unfettered, unfiltered perspective on who Ryan Grubb is as an offensive coordinator, how good or not good you think he is as an offensive coordinator. I'd just love to hear where you're at with him right now.
Well, only specific to this season, right? Like, what he did at UW speaks for itself. Like, whatever's going on this year doesn't erase what he did at Fresno State or UW. Like, he has a good offensive mind. And like we've expressed a lot of those caveats now with like the new environment and everything, and all the inefficiencies that can come from that. So just assessing this season, even accounting for the O-line and acknowledging that the O-line is a huge hindrance, just like it was last year and would be for any offensive coordinator. The way that I know how to like express it the most succinct, concise way is that he's a really good tactician, and strategically the offense is leaving a lot to be desired right now. And I think the strategy, the macro structure of the offense is so, prohibitive and compounding the issues that it's undermining and erasing his tactical designs, like their effectiveness. And so really what that amounts to is, because of his structure and the imbalance there, what that means is, to me, is that he's tipping his plays all over the place. Like, defenses know, they don't know necessarily every play, like the exact down to the exact detail, but they can, like, defenses are really smart, especially NFL. The average NFL player is so much smarter than the average college player, just through experience and them, getting to the NFL period, right? They're constantly trying to nail down, like, all right, the information that's being presented to me pre-snap, that can mean A, B, and C. Okay. All right. And then post-snap, something happens. Okay. That means it's in the A world. And then within the A world, what could possibly be happening, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they play that game where they funnel down all the information the offense is signaling to the defense, so that they can inform themselves, how do I adjust? How do I defend what I'm seeing? Right. And so essentially, like, Grubb, through his structure, is not making that, like, information game difficult for the defense at all. And so, like, I think it starts with one, how much time he spends in shotgun and how much time he spends under center. And then therein, how much he's passing and running accordingly. So like within shotgun, I think he's passing too much. I think he needs to pass slightly less, get more runs in the sample, so that when you're in shotgun, the defense can look at this and go, hey, they're going to throw the ball, or okay, they actually run it a little bit. So that means we're not going to just trot out our 4 best pass rushers on 1st and 10. We're going to put out our 330-pound nose tackle. And then that means when it is time to drop back, Geno has a little bit more time. And that makes his tactical designs, Grubb's, more effective, because you can get into you have just literally just a hair more time. And then when you're in under center, I mean, the average under center pass rate in the league is like 33%, I believe. The really good teams that really go for it try to push 40%. And right now he's like at 28-29%. And that's simply like, under center play action is supposed to be a crutch for an offense, especially an offense that has a bad offensive line. He's simply not taking advantage of that. Like, he should be passing more. So even though you want to be a pass first team, you can keep the same pass rate that you have right now just by virtue of running slightly more in shotgun and offsetting that with slightly more under center passing. And then within that, you're optimizing both formation buckets, because you're making the defense play a little bit more honestly, making them read their keys instead of just like, all right, well, I kind of know what they do here because of tendency. And then within shotgun, even though he's still passing quite a bit, they're still running just enough that they can play action if they want. And they're simply not touching shotgun play action. I think that's just an unfortunate, huge oversight to not have installed in your offense. Shotgun play action was a huge boon for them last year. And they've just thrown that out the window. And they have their reasons. Like, it's not Madden where you can just press buttons, right? But I mean, there's install time. And that's something Grubb talked about, right? Install time being different. That's something I wonder about. And then within under center, like, the defense knows what's happening. So like, even though they're running a lot, they're not establishing anything, because the play fakes aren't tethered to the actual runs. So, and like, to simplify that even more, when they run the ball in under center, it's a strong side run action. When they play action, it's a weak side play fake. So if the linebackers read any sort of weak side run fake or weak side run action, they don't know if it's a fake yet, right? Right off the snap, if it's to the weak side, they know it's play action. So they get into their pass drop. If it's a strong side run action, they go, oh, this is actually a run, so I'm going to defend the run. And that makes both the run and the pass predictable right off the snap. So that's in part why, no matter how bad the O-line is, that's in part why the under center running isn't as good as it could be, even with this O-line, because the linebackers know you're running it when you're running it. And then when it's a play fake, that's why they're one of the worst play action teams this year, even in under center, after being elite at it last year, because they know when it's coming. Like, all the play designs are fine. Like, what he's doing downfield is great. It's just not paired up with the run fake. And that's where, like, my mind is, it's strategy. It's not tactics, So they got to find a way to smooth that out, to even access what Grubb does well. I don't really have an answer as to like why it's this, why it's that kind of, like sloppily formulated, but it is. And I don't know, we gotta see that smooth out. And I hope we do see it smooth out against the Cardinals. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of great stuff there. And it's interesting you talk about tipping plays, because I did a show yesterday and then I wrote an article on hawkblogger.com about the problems in short yardage. And to start the year, they were through week 5. So through the Giants game, they were top 5 in the NFL in converting short yardage, 3rd or 4th and 2 or less. And 5 of the first 6 times that they passed the ball in those situations, it converted. Since week 6, they've been dead last in the NFL in short yardage conversion. And 5 of their last 6 pass attempts in those situations have failed. And the only one that succeeded was DK Metcalf drawing a defensive pass interference against the Jets in that game-winning drive. So it didn't really work. It just didn't fail. And in looking at those plays, I watched every single short yardage play through the whole year. the reaction from the defense when they do play action or they do a pass play in those situations, they're plastering guys. Like there is absolutely no false step toward the run game. There's no mystery. And so that was an open question for me. Like it sure seems like they are tipping their tendencies there. And you would hope that's absolutely Grubb's responsibility as well as Scott Huff's responsibility.
Right.
But that's also Mike Macdonald's responsibility. He's a defensive coach. He knows he should be able to self-scout and be really clear with Ryan Grubb of like, I can tell you what you're going to do.
Right.
His own defenders in practice should be able to say like, I know exactly what's coming here.
Right.
I don't like everyone just points at Grubb and I get that, but why isn't that the whole coaching staff? Like that's not a hard thing. If you and I are picking up on that, why aren't they?
Well, and they might be actually, and that might be what's kind of leading kind of what Grubb is kind of signaling, whether he's meaning to or not, to the media in those interviews. That kind of might be what he's referring to. Like there might be some conversations about like what you're doing formationally, especially like we talked about under center, but like shotgun, he's starting to tip what he's doing in empty again. The first month of the season, their empty numbers were terrible after being really good in empty last year. And then the second, like the middle 6 weeks of the year, they were great in empty because they started, well, doing different things off of the same precise formation looks. And then they stopped doing that again. They started to, I mean, look, when empty 3x2, right, to the 3 receiver side, if the running back is the widest receiver, so they align number 1, and the number 2 receiver, so the second guy in, is on the line of scrimmage, and the running back is off the line of scrimmage. The number 2 is on the line of scrimmage and one of either Tyler, JSN, or DK Metcalf. They're running a play called stick invert or shock. And friend at PFF told me that the Seahawks run the most shock out of empty than any other team. And they do it off of that precise alignment combination. If they simply did it with Bobo as the number 1 and DK and the number 2, that might give that same play more of a chance, just because the defense is like, oh, okay, running back there, DK there, okay, they're running stick invert, DK is running a fade, number 1's hitching, the number 3 is running a stick. Okay, I know exactly what's coming. If they just mixed up like who is where even off of the same formation, they could give it some more looks. And like Macdonald being like, he built his defense in Baltimore off of spread offenses in the AFC, Burrow, Josh Allen, Mahomes, right? Even Lamar, seeing Lamar in practice. You can't hide stuff from Mike Macdonald in shotgun. So when he's watching the tape every week, he has to know. I have to imagine they're having conversations about what the formations are like out of shotgun when they spread it out. So, I mean, at least I hope, right? Like you said, that is on him. The head coach has a responsibility for both sides of the ball. So hopefully we see some variety there, you know?
Well, so one of the things when I was looking at this, Griff, I started just kind of going through different cuts of data, and it turns out the Seahawks have a first down problem. I don't know if you've looked at this by down, but I will pull this up using Ben Baldwin's RBSDM. If you don't know what that stands for, folks, running backs still don't matter, is I'm guessing where that comes from.
And you don't want to reverse some of those letters, by the way.
You do not. Yes, you'll end up on a very different site. That's so funny, man. Yeah. So if you just narrowed a first down, the Seahawks are 28th in the NFL in EPA per play. And if you go to success rate, which for me personally, I like success rate better, but whatever. They tend to be
like success. It's like batting average. I like it.
Yeah, it's a little bit more correlated. They're 17th on first down. So that's a pretty big difference, actually. If you exclude plays with turnovers, which I like to do in some of these situations, it does change a little bit. The Seahawks are 24th in EPA, but still pretty low in that situation. If you go to second down, just look at second down, and I'm going to go second and third down combined in a second. So again, remember you're like bottom third essentially in EPA per play, one of the bottoms. If you just look at second down, the Seahawks are 8th in the NFL in EPA per play on offense. If you look at success rate, they are 10th. And one of the things I found in doing this and looking at what's the difference? Well, they're a decent running team on second down. It's the only down where they run the ball at all. They're 12th in the NFL in rush EPA on second down. They are 11th in success rate on second down. And so the reason I bring this up, I'll give you the last number here, and then I'll tell you why I'm kind of getting into this minutia.
Yeah.
So if you do second and third down together, the Seahawks are 12th in EPA per play. They are 15th in success rate. Not great, but not terrible. So these aren't bad numbers, but they got a first down problem. Yeah. And what I come back to is there's a lot of dissection of Grubb and pass and this, that, and the other. I think it might be as straightforward as they are an awful running team. They've been really struggling to figure that out. And I think it is infecting the entire playbook. I think it's infecting the entire offense's ability to get into advantageous situations where they can. You talk about tipping plays. Guess what's happening on 3rd and 9? I mean, like,
right.
You know what's going to happen there. So I think it does. And I want to share some other stuff in a second, but that was a big thing for me is it might be that straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, when you're really bad at running the ball, because you have to run the ball a little bit, right? And you'd rather those runs, go for 3 yards than -1, right? I mean, 3 yards isn't fun; it's negative EPA, but how bad you are at running is still important. So, like that's definitely a variable, and they are worse running the ball this year than last year. I mean, I still think they could help themselves though on, like, say, 1st and 10 running, by not signaling when they're doing it off of, especially from under center. They're not really tipping it as much in shotgun. And Grubb has coming from college, he has a really cool complement of gun run concepts. And they the variety kind of dried up, and I don't know why. Maybe it's that all the injuries and getting different guys in there. But like, we haven't seen very much what's called like GT counter out of shotgun. We saw some what's called like,
what's GT counter?
So counter is
guard
counter,
tackle.
Yeah, guard and tackle. Typically in counter, you've got the first puller through is the kick out, and the second puller or moving player is the lead block. So GT counter is if you don't have the tight end involved, who's your second guy? In this case, it's the backside tackle, right? Then you also had a play which is very similar to counter called bash, where one of the center pulls or maybe both guards pull. But the blocking scheme plays out very similarly. You're just getting different angles. And then he had all this stuff. And then he also had what's called like a same side run game. Because in shotgun, the running back's to your right. The defense knows, well, the run has to go to the quarterback's left, right? Because you're going from one direction to the other. So to prey on that, assumption, you'll have the running back go in the direction opposite of the quarterback, called the same side run scheme. There's a variety of things you can do there. And we haven't seen a lot of that except for recent weeks, actually, with like the same side toss play into the boundary, usually with the quarterback and the running back. And even though it hasn't gone anywhere, I think even though those runs haven't been successful, I still think it's important to put out that variety on tape to make the defense honor it, to play honestly, so they can't just fire off of their pre-snap and immediate post-snap information. Make them defend more things. Even if they defend some of those things well, you have to give them more to think about so that you can become less predictable. But one thing though with the 1st and 10 like pass game that I think that's kind of a problem is that's when Grubb really gets into, I think, some of his favorite pass play concepts, and he doesn't have the O-line for them. And what he's not doing on 1st and 10 is he's not taking what the defense gives you, so to speak. And I know that it annoyed a lot of people last year. Like, I get it. It's not how you want to use them ideally, but like JSN and the RPO and like all those bubble screens he caught. I mean, he did well with them, but that was applying a constraint on the defense and making them defend more things that could open up things later on. And their first down efficiency last year was really, really good. And with DK, if the corner is off, Grubb is still trying to run him deep and have him run a double move, which sometimes it works, which is great. But like, what happened to the 6-yard hitch in the flat to DK? That sets up a 2nd and 3. That's just gone out the window. And when you do that with DK, if the corner's tired of giving up that free yardage, then they press him. Then, oh, okay, the outside release go ball is back because they're pressing him. They can't get DK going deep down the sideline and outside release stuff because they're not seeing enough press. Now they're able to hit like the dig and go, the slant and go. That's the great constraint. That's where Grubb is solving that issue. But he can't get DK going down the sideline simply because of, not because he doesn't know how to do that, like just run him on a go route, but because he can't get the looks. And those looks are because he's not applying like the complimentary calls. He wants to get into like deep in his bag and do his favorite stuff. And I just don't think that marries up with the constraints of his O-line. And hopefully that changes. Now they did hit two sideline balls to DK. Hopefully we see more of that. Because that's got to be, because when DK is on the field, the defense is like, uh-oh, what do we do? I don't think Grubb is always applying that threat of DK structurally in that sense. It's that balance, that relationship that needs to be given a lot of care to. But yeah, hopefully it changes.
So there's a bunch of more I want to talk through. At some point in the next few minutes, I'm going to have to do something I wouldn't do with a normal guest, if you're cool with it. I'm going to have to go get my son off on a carpool to where he's going. And I will give you a topic to cover while I'm gone. But I don't want to end it. I was going to end us early, but my wife's still sleeping. I want to let her sleep, and I want us to continue a conversation if you're open to it. So
yeah, sure.
So that makes sense, and I don't doubt that. And one of the things that I've been critical about Grubb about is I feel like the run game. You talk about the pass game and the variability there. The lack of misdirection I've seen in how they approach the run game here versus what I saw at UW has been really noteworthy. And one of the plays I showed yesterday was just it was a 4th and short against the Falcons, and they had, blockers flowing one direction. It looked like they were going to potentially pitch to Kenneth Walker going one way, but they handed off to Zach Charbonnet going the other way. It held the second level defenders because they had to wait to see if it was going to pitch it to K9 for the outside run. And it worked. They got like 7 yards on it. And it's not complicated, but we haven't seen that. And one of the things I want to show you, Griff, this is not related to misdirection, but I started charting gap versus zone blocking. For the Seahawks run game week over week. I'm actually going to be writing about this, so a little sneak peek for folks. But do you notice something? The blue is zone blocking. It's about 50-50 most of the way until last week.
Yep.
They went almost completely gap last week, and it was the best run game I think we've seen from them. Now, I know the numbers don't show that, but I thought the potential in that game, they could have gone big in that game on the ground. I think that could have been a 150, 160 yard game if a couple things had gone differently. And the reason I bring this up is I think part of the difference is he talked about knowing your guys and what they can do. They now have Satoa Lamea, and maybe they feel like he's able to do things differently than what Bradford or Haynes. One of the questions I have for Grubb that I haven't asked him yet is, do you think that you have offensive linemen that are better at gap blocking than zone blocking? Are they all kind of the same? And I don't know if he'll say the honest answer, but I think he'd say that they are different. Yeah,
I think he would say that. I think the other component of it, though, is what are his coaches better at coaching? The under center, wide zone, outside zone world isn't something that Huff has a lot of experience with. But I agree with you that these guys can move people north-south quite easily, and that might be why they had so much success with gap runs. I think, and Nate Tice tweeted about it. He had a great thread if you saw it. Their duo runs, which is a gap scheme. I mean, they averaged like 6 yards per carry on it. Doesn't mean they're going to do that every week, but like they found a run that works, and that is also a strong side run. So like when they ran that, like the Jets knew it was coming too. That's the other thing that's exciting about it. And they still couldn't really stand up against them. The Jets have a good front and they have good linebackers, even with Mosley out. So that's something like, okay, great. You established duo's established. Play action off of duo now, off of strong side duo. their play action, they are using play fakes off of a weak side duo, which doesn't really exist. Teams don't run weak side duo. If they read duo footwork and Geno opens to the weak side, to the side where there's no tight end, their linebackers are like, this isn't a run because that run doesn't exist. No one runs a weak side duo. Maybe the Seahawks have maybe ran that twice all year. But every pocket play action, Geno opens to the weak side, and they're pairing it with duo footwork, duo blocking, and they're like, this is a pass. You're not running it. So hopefully this week, like, yeah, you got those duo looks. The Cardinals are going to be revved up for it. They're going to like, we got to kill this in the cradle. Play action off of those looks now. You might actually get the linebackers sucked down, and you'll finally have JSN screaming wide open over the middle now. So let's see it, you know. But yeah, that is definitely seems to be their calling card, and hopefully he can mix in, like you said, more misdirection, more motion off of that. The reason why that's important is because you can get your backside pass protector from different spots. And I think the reason why Grubb and Huff are afraid of running certain play fakes to pair with their play action is because they don't know how to get the protection in the direction they want it. Because when you play action, you often full slide, and that means the backside guy's unblocked. So you either have to get a running back or a tight end involved, and they're running weak side, so the running back is also going weak side, and he's the backside protector. But then they don't run weak. So it's like you solve this problem with your strong side runs, play fake up to the strong side, and with your weak side play fakes, then run to the weak side so that you can literally balance out your tendency, and your play action might actually improve. So yeah, hopefully they can rally around this stuff. Like, there is a path here.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to share here, by the way, Rachel just got up, so I'm not going to abandon you. It seems like is that this is looking at composite pass protection ratings, and Seahawks here are 26th in offensive line pass protection specifically. I think this is just pass protection. This does not look at overall ratings. If you look at run, it would probably be different. The reason I bring this up is when we're having this conversation about Grubb, that I find there's very little nuance, because most people just are like, hey, the offense sucks. The offensive coordinator sucks. Let's get a new offensive coordinator. That's just like the basic conversation.
Either touchdowns or no touchdowns. Right?
Yeah. What I see, Griff, is a guy that's had a really bad offensive line. No one's going to argue that. That's also gone through massive personnel changes. They've gone through 4 different right tackles. They've gone through 3 different right guards. They've gone through 2 different centers. And I think that those players had different capabilities and different weaknesses and different things that they had to change. I'm sorry, like, I really like Mike Jarrell when he was in there. I think the offense needed to operate differently than when Abe Lucas is in there. Yeah. And so I look at all that and I'm like, you can't really even figure out. Think about getting all the way back to our first topic about Mike McDonald. What did they do? They went through a few weeks. They found that the personnel was not capable of doing what Mike McDonald wanted. And so what did they do? They changed the personnel. They got guys in that are good players. They didn't just like get some 6-round rookie that they stuck in there. They got quality players to help fix the problem. And now it's going really well. And everyone's like, Mike McDonald's a hero. Well, I think it's a little bit of crap that everybody knows the offensive line play has been as bad or worse than any of the linebacker play that we saw early in the year. And yet the fact that he hasn't had that to work with is kind of just set aside. Was like, yeah, well, he still sucks. I don't think you can really separate those two things. I think that you can be critical of certain things with Ryan Grubb. I have certainly been critical of certain things. I think to have a, middle of the pack offense with this offensive line, if I went back and showed you again, well, I might as well just do it. The other teams that are on that list, Griff, toward the bottom, the Patriots, the Titans, the Saints, the Giants, the Bengals are one. These are not teams that are good offenses, like in general. So I think it's very hard to have a good offense when your offensive line is one of the worst.
I don't disagree with you, and again, like I'm revising a little bit, like who I attribute that to, but that's on that chart last year, they were ranked like 29th. And they were 10th in EPA, 12th in points per drive. And that was in part like why I had fairly like pro Waldron sentiment. Obviously, it went terribly in Chicago, right? I think some of that, like Caleb was one of the most inaccurate quarterback seasons of like all time, but like Waldron's still a huge piece of that puzzle. He got fired, right? I'm revising a little bit of like I attributed their relative success last year to Waldron. Like I really think Carroll's oversight was a big piece of this, and that's why again go back to I'm really curious how McDonald how he oversees the offense over time. Yeah, I mean you were never going to be when they didn't have a good replacement plan for Damian Lewis and Haynes didn't work out. Like I get not paying Lewis. We would have had to overpay him to keep him, but you did not replace him well at all. Like you were never going to be as good as you wanted to be with this O-line. So I think when it comes to judging the OC, it's how good are you relative to this O-line? And I think like the O-line is a hindrance. Like it's still the root problem, but I do believe that he's also making it worse in some ways, and he's actually making it harder on them. I think that's what the tendency thing. But even so, if you snap your fingers and the O-line improves to, say, 15th best or whatever, then Grubb would take full advantage of that. He wouldn't be making it harder on them. He would just be using them to their abilities, and everything would be fine. Because it's not like when we view these things like when you talk about adding to a team, things rarely are ever in football, especially the sum of their parts. They're always either greater than or worse than the sum of their parts, in my view. And that's because things multiply positively and negatively. They don't really add together, in my view. So it's like you give one offensive coordinator, give one offensive coordinator a bad O-line, give one offensive coordinator an average O-line. One guy might do better than the other guy with the bad O-line, but the other guy might do better than the other guy with the average one. And I think Grubb is in that bucket where like, yeah, Grubb may not do as good of a job with the bad O-line as OC offensive coordinator B, but he might do a better job than offensive coordinator B if you gave each of them an average one. I think that's Grubb, because style matters too, right? Like styles make fights. I mean, yeah, we all want to see what Grubb can do with the 18th ranked O-line composite score, right? I mean, I would love to see that, because again, tactically, he's better than most of what we've seen in Seattle. I think the strategy is he's making it harder on himself, though. So how do you unlock those tactics? Really, is my thing.
Yeah, we're talking to Griff Sturgeon of the Seattle Overload podcast. Make sure you check out him and Maddie over there. Always great stuff. And yeah, I don't think there's any question that it is fair. Like the offense has been really, really wanting the last few weeks. And I've talked about this as well. Defenses have played. This is part of why I get back to the run game again, Griff, and the offensive line's talent level and continuity is part of the problem there. They've faced more zone. They've faced more too deep, too high than pretty much any team in the NFL over the last 5-6 weeks. And Gino's talked about it. He's talking about how people are dropping. Grubb's talked about it. And why are they doing that? Because they don't respect the run game in large part. Like they're not running anyone out of too high. Like they're just not. And so we've seen, I talked about with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, like, and Andy Reid, they're beyond reproach, right? When he came into the league and they were tearing things up, that was Tyreek Hill deep. Those were a bunch of chunk plays. When they won the Super Bowl last year, that was a lot of dink and dunk behind the line of scrimmage because everyone was playing too high on them and making sure they took away the explosives. So I feel like that's another factor here that teams are playing them because they don't respect the run game, and the Seahawks offense has not yet figured out how to do it. And when you look at the offensive line, to your point, it was not great last year. Would you take Damian Lewis over Laken Tomlinson?
Right. I mean, anyone would, right?
Would like Evan Brown over the course of the year, was he a better or at least equivalent center to the center play they've gotten the majority of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's roughly equal. I mean, he was up and down, but yeah, it's not like there's much of a difference there.
And then right guard, Anthony Bradford last year versus Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit worse given, Haynes's reps that have been in there. And then right tackle, so it's hard for me to say that there's any place other than left tackle where you can say anything's taken a step forward until right now. Like, to turn it around for a second, Griff, I see Abe Lucas looking like a player that can be as long as he's healthy, a longer term starter. Right. I saw some promise in what we saw from Laumea in that game, and some glimpses from Olu. Do you think the kernels are there? I mean, I'm not going to overstate it that there's some great offensive line. Do you see some flashes of what could be progress on the offensive line?
Well, I mean, it's funny that the best tackle pairing we've seen of this recent group was the first 3 months of 2022 as Cross and Lucas as rookies. In my mind, I keep thinking, can they get back to that? Can they reclaim that? So, I mean, look, you have to I think roster building wise, you have to just hope that Lucas and Cross are the answer. Like, I think Cross is. I mean, he may never be a top 10 guy, but he can be the top 15 left tackles in the league. I hope Lucas keeps, improving week to week, if at all. I think Oluwatimi can be. I mean, his play strength, I think, because that was the concern in camp, is he dropped weight to try to be more nimble, and I don't think it worked for him. I don't know if he gained it back or he got stronger or what, but he seems to at least have the play strength to work there. The rest is just going to be experience. He's a really smart guy. Right guard, I mean, look, I think Laumea has the tools, like, for real. I think he has legit guard tools in both run and pass. How good has he become? We've got no idea. We just got to keep watching. But when his technique is right, I mean, he can move bodies. That's what he did against New York. He blocked Quinnen Williams up a few times. So, like, what more can you ask for from a first game? I think roster building wise, you just have to hope they can find a left guard, and then the rest is like take those guys to their natural limit. Yeah. So beyond that, like, I don't know. I mean, do they want to throw a third or fourth round pick for a starting guard somewhere? I mean, maybe. I'm willing to get behind anything that is anything different than their previous process. So.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, Griff, is just when you bottom line it right now for Ryan Grubb, are you in the camp of, hey, this is a guy that we should be like actively looking to replace, and that take all the things that come with that, personnel department, getting to know a new guy, potentially new offensive line coach, go through that whole changeover again? Or do you think that you want to see this brought back and take another stab at it?
Well, so there's 5 games left, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they, and maybe more with playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. If they can substantially improve over those 5, like, well, really, it's just let the remaining 5 games do the talking. If they continue to nosedive like the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is, they're like in the bottom 6 or 7, the most efficiency metrics. If that sustains, then it might be time to really, really take a look. If he can kind of reclaim some, whatever, and they can improve over the final 5 games, and it can be looking something close, like, all right, this is what they could be, even with the O-line, then yeah, bring him back, and then maybe make a staff tweak where you either change someone or bring someone in, like some sort of established offensive coordinator to be like a consultant, someone like, what Gary Kubiak and Norv Turner have done in the twilight of their career. What is Byron Leftwich doing? Does he want to come, be a passing game coordinator? I mean, he has a lot of experience with the run game too, and we could help Huff out. I don't know, right? Anything like that. Frank Reich, like, what's going on? Beyond that, like, I don't know. I guess my mind is just let the final 5 games do the talking, and like, I don't want to like. I mean, like Rick McDonald says, like, guys are allowed to improve. Like, it goes for the coaches too. I mean, McDonald had his little, his arc over the season, right? So let Grubb kind of, finish the season off and then reassess, I guess, is my view.
Makes sense. It's level-headed, what I'd expect from you. Pragmatic. I think here's the scenario I'm braced for. I think there is a decent chance that the Seahawks finish the year strong offensively, that they make that, maybe not top 5 kind of performance, but that they are a productive crew and they find some balance and they're able to put up some good numbers.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a chance that either Grubb will decide to leave anyway, or McDonald will decide to move on anyway. Like there may be a irreconcilable differences kind of situation. I'm not positive and not reporting that by any stretch, but I still have a lot of respect for Ryan Grubb as a offensive coordinator. I think Seahawks fans should be really careful about what they wish for in changing over OCs. And there's a lot worse out there than Ryan Grubb. So I think the assumption is that you trade up. That's not always the case. So especially if you're talking about an OC position and not a head coach position. So we'll see. I hope that it turns around. I hope that they figure out and they have fun together and that it comes back, because ultimately, if you're a Seahawks fan, the best possible answer is that they find their footing and there's continuity, so that you're getting the personnel department, the players, and the coaching staff getting those miles together so that they can build on it as opposed to starting from scratch.
Right. Well, 100%. If you were to go into year 2 with the exact same O-line, just to keep things all equal in the experiment for the hypothetical sake, they would do a better job in year 2 with the offense, even with the same players. I definitely believe, like, I don't think that they would stagnate or regress further. So, like I have no doubts the offense will be better next year. It also matters, like, how does ownership view? Anytime they don't make the playoffs, changes happen. Like, I don't know if it's like a yes/no mandate, pass/fail mandate, regardless of why or how you get there.
Yeah.
If they don't make the playoffs, heads roll. That seems to be, I don't know if it's Vulcan's MO. That was Pete and John's MO. I have no idea, but that seems to be the thing. So all this might be moot if they don't make the playoffs. So, I mean, maybe it's like, hey, even if the offense still is bad, but they make the playoffs, they give everyone a breather and everyone can start over. I don't know. We'll see. So
give me a quick beat on the game tomorrow. What are you expecting in this game?
I think both offenses are more competent than they were in the first game, but I still think both defenses have the better day. So instead of each team scoring in the teens, I think each team scores in the low to mid 20s with not necessarily great efficiency. So my guy, I've been predicting losses and I've been wrong. So I'm going to predict a win. Maybe I'm jinxing it. I don't know. But I think I'm, Geno in a dome, whatever. 26-24 Seahawks has been my guess.
Love it. All right. Everyone, make sure you follow Griff, C Mike's 2 S's Spin Move, both on Twitter and Blue Sky, and check out him and Maddie on Seattle Overload. Great stuff as always there. Griff, thanks so much for joining us on Seahawks Saturday.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. All right. That is Griff Sturgeon from Seattle Overload. And a lot of great stuff there. Let me get to some super chats here. Chris Clark has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Love that. Thank you so much, Chris. DJ Burnett with the super chat says, love the show, Brian. Go Hawks. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Moshi Moss has been a member for 3 months. Thanks for being a long-term supporter. Really, really appreciate that. I'm hoping at some point we're going to get as the show continues, 2 years, 3 years, that people are part of this community. I think it's going to be great. Robert Charles, I just discovered your channel. Well done. Well, welcome, Charles. Consider joining as a member. Maybe that's too forward, but I think hopefully you'll like it enough that you'll stick around. Michael Mathis, who's been a member for 7 months. Hypothetically speaking, let's say Leslie Frazier gets signed elsewhere or retires. Do you sign a veteran offensive-minded assistant coach like Frank Reich, for example? Well, you heard Griff. He would. I don't think Leslie Frazier is going to retire. I think he's going to stick around. I know it's a hypothetical, but all my interpersonal EQ spidey senses are that there's going to be a change here on the OC side. I don't want that to be the case, but that's just where my gut is telling me. We'll see. There's 5 games left at least, and we'll see what goes on with there. Shiv, hey Shiv, good to see you, man. He says, Griff fanboy reporting for duty. Well, I'm glad you could make it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that time with Griff. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation, not a super hot takey, it didn't make it a people's court version where we were arguing against each other, but I tried to take a little bit more of the side of why I think Grubb deserves a little bit of grace more than I think I'm seeing in the fan base. And I knew Griff has been critical of a lot of stuff with Grubb, so it was good to have him on here covering some of that perspective. And, you know I saw a lot of stuff in chat. People have different perspectives as well. You know, I'll just say this is not a terrible offense. It has been terrible for the last few weeks, but over the balance of the season, it has not been a terrible offense. And I think people are very quick to ignore JSN having a career year, DK Metcalf having a career year, Geno Smith to some extent having a career year. And I really do believe that the run game is a massive part of what's a problem here. And if they can get that turned around, that would be big. But going to be hard if Kenneth Walker does not play this week, and it seems highly questionable. It's literally questionable whether he's going to play based on the injury report. And then, we'll see if Zach Charbonnet, he's not stepped in well when he's been asked to take over as lead back so far. Maybe things will change over the course of this game. We'll see if George Halani, who has been activated from practice squad IR, is one of the players elevated today. So at noon Pacific time today, I think we'll see whether there's practice squad elevations. I would expect one of those elevations to be the punter that they just signed to the practice squad as a safety valve in case Michael Dixon is unable to complete the game on Sunday. The other elevation I would guess is going to be George Halani, who could potentially help in kick returns, could also help additionally as a running back should Kenneth Walker not play. We'll see what they do at kick return. You know, I honestly, the number one guy I was hoping to see as a kick returner is Zach Charbonnet. I think he's really well built for this. I have not been impressed with what I've seen from Kenny McIntosh. I know there's a lot of Kenny McIntosh fans out there. I wouldn't mind if he does it and he proves me wrong, but he has not seemed secure with the football in the times I've seen him do it. And to me, that's job number one. So I would rather see Zach Charbonnet, but if Zach Charbonnet is the lead back, you're not going to probably see him back there returning kicks as well. That could also mean that a guy like George Halani gets more chances or somebody else. Obviously, we'll see the new kick returner for them returning punts. So we'll see what happens there, but interested in seeing what happens in this game. I will be flying out here. I'm heading to the airport in just a few minutes, and we'll be down there tonight and then head over to the stadium for the game tomorrow, covering it from the press box as usual. I'll have a pregame show for you tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that. Make sure that you give the show a like, click subscribe. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, maybe TikTok soon. I'll see about creating an account on the flight. All at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode, I think, 258 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. So take care, y'all. Appreciate you, and I will see you soon.